Okay, good morning. Thanks for joining us on this webinar today. This is a joint webinar between Antaurus Solutions and Sitrion, formerly known as NewsGator, and it's all around getting more out of SharePoint with enterprise social collaboration. So the presenters this morning are myself, Roland Parr. I work as a client engagement manager for Antaurus Solutions, and I'm joined as well by Jeanette, one of the sales directors of the APAC and Japan regions for Sitrion. By way of agenda, we'll just give you a quick overview of who Antaurus are, some of our capabilities and some of our customers, as well as just step through a couple of case studies of where our SharePoint customers are using Sitrion technologies. I'll then pass over to Jeanette, who will give you some more information about Sitrion, and then give you a presentation and a demonstration all around when SharePoint and Yammer can actually fit your social requirements or your social needs. This is a listen-only webinar, but we will be taking questions throughout and at the end via the chat window, which is the bottom right-hand corner of your GoToMeeting client. So feel free to have a think of some questions as we're going through. So a quick overview on Antaurus. We are a Microsoft Gold partner based in Sydney, about 35 staff, and professional consulting services organisation, and really split our business up into four main pillars of concentration, which are productivity, business intelligence, managed services, and innovation. So productivity, we're heavily focused on the Microsoft SharePoint platform. We really use it as a vehicle of choice to build solutions for our customers. With business intelligence, it's all around helping our organizations turn their data into information, and that information ultimately into knowledge, and get hold of that information via reports and dashboards and a self-service model. Managed services will provide a range of support contracts. We also help with migrations to different data centers, whether that's a private cloud or a public cloud option, and we can help you with that. And finally, innovation. We've built many solutions for many different organizations over the years, and if you have requirements, there's maybe a pre-packaged solution we can give to you, as opposed to reinventing the wheel every time. In terms of the sort of projects that we normally do, we specialize heavily in corporate intranets using SharePoint, business process improvement and automation using forms and workflow technologies like Nintex, for example. We specialize in social business tools, and Sitrion being a key partner in this space that we'll have a demonstration of shortly. We do a lot of work around information management, whether that's document management or records management on the SharePoint platform. And then where SharePoint doesn't quite fit everyone's requirements, we can do custom developed solutions to help bridge that gap. With the improvements in the SharePoint platform, we're also seeing a lot of organizations use SharePoint for their website as well. So we've done a number of public website designs for organizations. And as I mentioned before, business intelligence and reporting and dashboards is a key skill that we have. And whether you do this on your own infrastructure or on a data center or a cloud provider, we can also help you with those solutions as well. Just a few of our customers. As you can see, we work with a number of organizations, small, medium, large, enterprise, and here's a snapshot of a few of them. But what I'll do is I'll just step you through a couple of case studies of where our SharePoint partners and organizations have the platform and wanted to take it to the next level, and have used Sitrion's technologies to help give them an enterprise social network. So this is an example of an intranet we built for the Australian National Maritime Museum. And ultimately, by putting in Sitrion's toolset to have an enterprise social network, they saw a reduction in their internal emails, using a news feed as their main method of communication, helped increase the effectiveness of their corporate communications, the ability to target different messages to different communities of practice across the business, and then ultimately gauge the sentiment of the business by how many people respond, how many people like, how many people ask questions of that. All of a sudden, they had two-way communication from the business down to the end users, and also allowed staff to find employees based on different skill sets by looking at the social profiles, looking at what skills they have, past projects or interests, and ultimately deciding whether they should be part of a project team, or ultimately whether they had skills in-house and had to and could avoid going to external hire because they had the skills in-house and could find them. This is another example of an organization using SharePoint and wanted to extend that using Sitrion's social networking tools. So this is for a law firm called Allen's Linklaters. They effectively wanted a social workspace for each of their specialisms in which they provide law services for. So every lawyer, as part of the power and utilities sector, could come into this workspace and track documents, conversations, see who else was providing services in this area, and have communications instead of always going through email. And it ultimately helped with the overall user adoption of the SharePoint platform, making all the lawyers go to these workspaces to get their job done on a daily basis. Also allowed the corporate comms team to push communications out onto the internet, and knowing people are actively going to the platform to get hold of that information as well. I'm happy to step you through some more examples. My contact details will be sent out afterwards. And if you want to give me a call or send me an email, I can go through some of those in more detail and provide demonstrations. What I'll do now is I'll pass you over to Sinead from Sitrion, and he'll give you a presentation and a demonstration of when SharePoint and Yammer don't fill the social need. I'll just pass over to Sinead now.
All right, thank you very much, Roland. Appreciate that. And my name again is Junaid Saul, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the scenarios we've seen where folks would actually like to use social collaboration tools beyond and above, what are those provided from 2013 in Yammer in terms of the social capabilities. And when we talk through some of these scenarios, I do want to make clear that for many organizations, they may have minimal requirements or sufficient requirements that are met by either of these products because they may have just started their social journey, or they have, in terms of the way they're actually adopting SharePoint, they don't have to worry about some of these use cases. So we, from a Sitrion perspective, we're a very strong global partner, one of Microsoft's top 22 partners in the world, and we've helped them cater their roadmap to help allow people to begin their social journey. And so if you haven't used a tool like Yammer, if you haven't, played around with some of the social features in 2013, I totally encourage you to use those products. I don't think there's a single customer of ours that hasn't looked at Yammer or at least gone through that experimentation phase that we often see in social networking tools, that actually haven't used Yammer in the past. So really important for you to start that journey and at least get some of that maturity under your belt so you can make an informed decision on what your real social requirements are, because every organization is different, right? I think that our goal is pretty clear as a company, is that we focus on making work better. Part of our transition to the Sitrion rebranding is that we have seen that in addition to just being a connected worker who can use mobile devices and use social applications, we've seen that one of the more powerful things that once you are mature in using social tools is that you want to be able to use social to actually make more informed decisions. So you can actually be a smarter employee. And what that really ties into what we're seeing the niche for in the future of social networking that we're seeing with our most thought-leading clients is that they've taken the steps to actually integrate things like processes into their social network, and so that they can actually be more productive, and so that you can actually execute your tasks using the power of social capabilities. So we'll talk a bit about those more advanced use cases, but what I think we're speaking to here is that every organization is different, whether it is your culture or it depends on your actual type of work style. And further to that, every employee is different. So there's really going to be a different type of interface that, or we've talked about dashboards in the past, and Forrester and Gartner have referenced those, and that every workplace for the digital employee is slightly different. And so we feel that is definitely the truth in our own experiences, whether you're working in the retail sector versus defense or public service. You're going to have a different employee profile. And so for each of those organizations, they will have different social needs. So it's really important to look into the requirements. It's very hard to just accept a blanket statement that product XYZ is going to solve all your needs. So I think webinars like this will be very instrumental in helping folks understand where the tools make sense and how they can actually help you get your job done. If you don't link it to business value, it's very challenging to actually get a sense of like what the right tools are. So we're going to look at a bit about what we're hearing from the market as a vendor, what we're doing from a product perspective in terms of capabilities, and we'll also share with you some of our strategy in the future. So let's go ahead and first take a look at the marketplace. So what I'm hearing, essentially from our side of things when I work with clients across Asia Pacific, and more broadly from like a, kind of a NewsGator perspective in general, is that when we see clients who are looking at SharePoint 2013 or Yammer, one of the things that we encounter when they approach us is they say, well, you know what, I do like some of the features inside Yammer. It's something that we want to try, but as an organization, we simply don't have the ability to use cloud technologies. We're just not, quote unquote, ready for the cloud yet. And I think it was Steve Ballmer, former CEO of Microsoft, who had said back in 2012, in the early years of that year, he had actually mentioned that I don't think there's been a time that Microsoft has been so far ahead of their customers as they are right now. And so Microsoft is making strides into the cloud space, but their client base is predominantly on-premise. So that's going to be one of the challenges there. And so what we also look at as another showstopper is in terms of when we see folks looking at upgrading to SharePoint 2013 to actually get a first taste of their social features if they say are using an older version of SharePoint. So if you look at some of the research from AIIM, the International Information Management Institute, you'll see that folks predominantly take around about a year to almost 2 years after a release of SharePoint to be able to plan and implement that upgrade. And what that means is that from those perspectives, the cultural change, that kind of analysis that I talked about of being able to understand what are your social requirements, what is the culture and appetite of my company for deploying social, those decisions can't begin until the platform's installed. So that's kind of a challenge to see, that you perhaps have to wait 2 to 3 years for those timelines. One thing that's interesting that I want to divert attention to for just a second in terms of this discussion of, what are some showstoppers. If you are following some of the news, you might know that the Sharepoint Conference is actually being hosted right now in Las Vegas. And so what you can see on my screen here is essentially a blog post from Jared Spataro. So he has actually shared this blog post around and was published, let's see, it's published on March 4th, so I think about 2 days ago, and it's called Work Like a Network, Enterprise Social and the Future of Work. And this is a great post because it clearly shows Microsoft's direction into creating the foundation for a cloud-based social network tool that really has Yammer making some great connections between documents and Office 365 and some other components using Open Graph purely in the cloud. And this is cool stuff. This is what all social vendors get excited about. But I think when you read through some of the future points, what really all the Microsoft customers are wondering is, well, what should I do, right? What should I do now? And so what I think one of the interesting points is that Spataro comes out and says kind of clearly is that while we're committed to another on-premises release of SharePoint Server and will maintain its social capabilities, we don't plan on adding new social features. And so we've written a blog post about our kind of reaction to these statements, as well as some of the new social capabilities and how we plan on integrating our application and Sitrion social sites to this. But I think it's important for clients to understand that if they are, say, one of those clients who are quote-unquote not ready for the cloud, they will not see any new features coming from Microsoft in the new version of SharePoint Server 2016. So that's one thing to keep in mind. We're seeing a feature set that's not going to evolve in the on-premise version of SharePoint. And this is an eventuality that we had somewhat expected given our relationship to Microsoft. And so we're not really necessarily surprised about this. We think Microsoft's investments in social will continue to be in the cloud, of course, with Yammer. So for organizations that have a steady focus and huge investment in on-premise, whether that be for the technological, regulatory, or security reasons, such as financial services or defense, those are going to be some challenges for them to embrace these tools. Now, some other decision points that people have if they're not flat-out showstoppers for in terms of using 2013 or Yammer or other cloud tools is, again, as I've mentioned, is going back to the use cases. This is what we consult our clients all the time over and over again, is that, why are you using social? What are your core use cases you want to accomplish? And again, these are tying classical collaboration challenges to the product feature set, and we'll get straight into that. The other thing that we see that conversations that we have to have discussions around is that, does your social tool fit in with the infrastructure you have in place today? Do you have to expand that footprint? Are you going to have to create, network connectivity and single sign-on and authentication to be able to get some of the user profiles to sync with the cloud tool like Yammer? Those are all kind of considerations you have to have. And in addition, are you going to roll out mobility, right? Some organizations, if they, if mobility is a very strong need for them, they might want to rely on a cloud tool if they don't have the ability to connect back into a actual on-premise environment. And so we have some capabilities to help with that. We have our own mobile cloud VPNs as well, so you don't have to have a VPN, even if you're trying to connect back to SharePoint on-premise. And finally, as I mentioned before, if you are a very process-centric organization, if you're constantly processing claims or tasks or workflows, and you're very workflow-centric, it would make a lot of sense in your business that you're going to want to apply the benefits and the acceleration capabilities of decision-making in a collaborative environment. You're going to want to have a tool that can apply that to business processes. Tools like Yammer don't have integrations to, say, ERP systems or back-end processes to be able to speed those things up. So that's an important part that we've seen from more mature clients of ours, like JP Chase. Those clients want to realize the value of social tools on top of a very process-centric environment. And so in terms of strategy, you'd want to look to your vendor to understand, what is that vendor's path to the cloud? What is that process? And so one of the things that we focus on as well is creating a really nice hybrid environment where you can actually combine the benefits of your SharePoint on-premise environment and be able to use social collaboration to share assets, conversations, discussions, and ideas with folks that are actually in Office 365. And so creating that seamless path to the cloud is going to help you as an IT department to have a solid 3 to 5 year roadmap, as opposed to, well, we just have to migrate everything and we can't operate in a hybrid environment. One of my own personal big bets is that hybrid solutions will be very, very popular in the coming years, and we might even see that it's going to get to a point of almost becoming like hype, as we've seen terms around cloud and mobility. So let's talk about some real-life examples. I mentioned a few, like some of the financial services industries. Naturally, clients that use us, like JP Chase for 100,000 employees, Barclays Bank, they use us for 140,000 employees, and even smaller but very robust and innovative organizations like AMP that use Sitrion for 7,000 employees. They've all in fact moved off of or shut down implementations of Yammer and analyzed SharePoint 2013. And some of the reasons for that is because they wanted to have an award-winning or leading-edge intranet, and to do that, your employees really expect to have one single tool. So it's very challenging to have a mixed-mode environment between Yammer and SharePoint. And so that depth of integration really speaks to the seamlessness of that tool. If you look at all the worldwide intranet challenges or Norman Nielsen Group awards, having a seamless, unified intranet experience is pretty much the standard par for the course if you're going to have a award-winning intranet. As well, when you look at financial services clients, it's no small feat to allow them to actually be able to use mobile devices. You've got to consider support for things like managed device suites, MDM suites, security, provisioning, and those things. And so, having a social tool that respects those tools, whether it's Good, AirWatch, Mobile Iron, all of which are supported and, in fact, used by our clients, those are important scenarios. And I mentioned, again, the sophisticated stories like, creating specific communities that are, say, driven by information that comes out of tasks, that comes from ERP systems. Those types of, strong use cases that are adjusting an existing business process that is either revenue generating or cost saving, those are challenging to do when you don't really have customization capabilities to tie that into a business process. Those are all things that we have seen and key forward-leading drivers in the financial services space. When we look at the aerospace industry, we do work with a European aerospace defense company that is responsible for making the Airbus A380, as well as the International Space Station. And when you've got 100,000 or so people working across 5 different agencies, you're going to run into mixed SharePoint environments. So if you do have a complex environment, you've got a bit of 2007 over here and a sprinkle of 2010 Portal over there and some 2013 thrown on the side. If you've got a buffet of different SharePoint environments, that's one thing that the social sites application is great for. We have a service that collects all the updates and information from those different environments and allows you to mix them together in multi-farm, and as well using tools like ADFS. We support all those complex environments, and that's just something that's not capable today if you're just trying to upgrade everything to 2013. So we appreciate a healthy dose of reality in the complex environments that people have. And when you look at it from a security perspective, when people want to innovate in certain industries, they want to be able to share ideas. They want to be able to do so not only so securely to protect intellectual property rights. Thinking if you're a pharmaceutical company or a product company, we support those use cases to attribute IP. But in addition, when someone creates a good idea, you might want to have people vote on that idea, circulate it, and then also crowdsource more comments and commentary so you can then execute that idea as a collaborative team. So really having that full innovation cycle and not just sharing an idea as a blog post, but sharing it as a special type of content, which is an idea that gets voted upon, has certain business rules, and again, is also tracking intellectual property. It's pretty valuable in creative and engineering industries. So these are just 2 kind of examples that we've seen. Okay, that's kind of talking what we run into the marketplace when we've been evaluated against some of the other opportunities out there for social tools. Let's talk a bit about what is actually physically in the product for some of the technicians inside the room. Well, the common use cases that we see that are really important, and social networking, as my CTO Brian Kellner likes to raise, for him the #1 use case, the most important thing statistically, as we've seen, is always question and answer. Right? People go into a social network predominantly to ask their staff, and predominantly people they don't know who are the experts, but they want to find out an answer to a question. They want to get help with the proposal. They want to answer a customer support query. They want to see who is the technical expert. And unfortunately, that's just not a native feature of 2013 or Yammer. When you look at communities, you want to have a tight integration to the actual team sites and documents that you might have, and being able to see a social stream reflecting those changes of new documents, new tasks, new calendars. Again, that's something that is not there yet with the integration with Yammer to SharePoint, and it's not going to be on the on-premise environment anytime soon. And so in addition, we look at things like reporting and recognition, the ability to reward people for their contributions, the compliance aspects for security and communication as well for targeting communications and innovation. So let's kind of dive into these. So when someone asks a question, again, by virtue of using hashtags, those hashtags will then drive this question to folks who are interested in pharmaceuticals and innovation. So even if I don't know who that expert is, it's going to go directly to them because of hashtag routing. And again, one of the powerful features of Sitrion is that our hashtags, they're actually the same tags that's already in SharePoint, the managed metadata store. And that might sound like gobbledygook to a non-technical person. What that means is that you don't have to have the different sets of hashtags and misplaced information. So it's really important those hashtags line up so that these messages get to the right people. And as we saw below, even as I'm typing this question, Sitrion has this powerful capability to suggest ahead and actually find posts that may be similar to the question that I'm trying to get an answer to. So I don't even have to bug anybody, and I can say, oh, look, my question's already been answered. It's inside the customer stories community, and I can learn about that pharmaceutical project right there. And that really speeds up things there. So another powerful thing is that when you want to get your question answered, you really like that to be able to attribute, to say that, hey, you know what, Toby answered my question here, and I can give her credit. I can mark that as the right answer. And what that happens is that Toby then can either win a badge, she can get points, and she can become an expert in this terminology around pharmaceuticals. And that is how we track and define expertise. This topic of expertise is by far the most important aspect of a social network. If you don't have good inputs into tracking who's an expert in what topic, you don't get the value of your social network. You don't know who is an expert, and it's impossible to find the right people. And you're kind of back to an employee directory and just a bunch of random conversations again. And so this process we've really thought out around how the best and most efficient way to address question and answer is. And again, it takes into a lot of things. It sounds very subtle, very simple, but there's a lot of complexity that goes into this defining this process. Now, as I mentioned, from a community perspective, obviously you're going to want to make sure that one of the things that you want to avoid is any confusion between, say, like, a social group and a team site, and having to, trying to understand what place do I store what document, and, is security respected, and all these kind of little questions. So what's great about Sitrion, from my perspective, is that I just log into one place to get all my documentation. I know that the team sites themselves just become social, and it's all respecting the security permissions inside Active Directory. And furthermore, it's fully integrated to SharePoint Search. So whether you're using SharePoint 2010, FAST 2013, all that information rolls up into Search, and again, adheres to the metadata that I'm kind of expecting. And you'll see that tying into email notifications as well, so that you'll see whenever anything changes in a community, I can actually respond back to an email notification, and it'll go back into that community, which is, again, a very powerful feature. If you're an executive and kind of on the road, you just want to use email. Reporting is something that we hear all the time when it comes to clients woeing about SharePoint in general. I'm sure many of you have got tools like Cardiolog or Web Trends installed, and that's just to get some basic good old web stats going. But when you embrace social networking and you go into the 2013 platform, or you might actually run into a situation where you'll realize that, oh, hey, wait a second, there's actually no social reporting for SharePoint 2013. So you won't be able to see the levels of participation. You won't be able to see the number of connections being formed. You won't see how often people are awarded badges, or seeing what your highest user activity levels are, and further, and so on and so on. So this is just a screenshot of the Sitrion reporting. It's called our engagement scorecard, and it shows you really granularly in a dashboard. You can configure what are the key matrices for success, across different regions and across different types of participation and engagement, such as questions, ideas, comments, documents, likes, all those things you can slice and dice. And without this, you really don't have a yardstick to measure the performance or to try to improve your social network's performance either. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, as the old adage goes. And one thing that I get pretty excited about is the ability to engage and encourage your employees. This capability that we talk about providing digital rewards to recognize people, it's something that's touched upon very briefly in Yammer in 2013. In 2013, it comes in the point of being able to, in a particular discussion, inside that discussion, someone can be an expert. You can physically award someone a badge. But unfortunately, this concept of badging is not universal across all of the entire SharePoint intranet or social network. So you can't be, say, an expert outside of just that discussion community. And if you've got more than, say, like 100 or 200 employees, I don't think you're going to want to be, manually handing out thousands and thousands of badges, across a large organization. It's just not going to be feasible. You'd have to hire a, kind of a badge administrator as a full-time job. So what we do is we have taken upon some of the more advanced features that you might see in, public social networks. And if you're a fan of the Microsoft Xbox platform, you'll know that if you reach a certain milestone, such as, say, perhaps answering lots of questions or sharing ideas that people really like, or getting lots of votes on your campaign contributions, you'll automatically be awarded a badge. And that automated or earned badging that you see on the right-hand side, that's a really key capability for being able to drive participation and create an automated way to train your employees to actually adopt more collaborative practices. So this really comes back to training. The reason you win a badge is because you want to change the ways people behave. And at the same time, that's done through making them feel good and rewarding them. And so we've got clients who tie this into fun things like red balloons or other adrenaline for other real-life rewards as well. So there's some great tie-ins to the HR benefits of the house. And what ends up happening is that once I've got people responding to questions and answering and providing good information and sharing good ideas, we track all that information in our expertise database. If you recall, I mentioned how important expertise is. And then what that allows us to do is to identify experts. Here in the center, you kind of see that spider graph, and I've searched for a term called analytics, and I'm trying to locate the top experts in that field of analytics in my company. And so I found Mark and Kelly and Toby and Jen and Liz, and the way I found that is because they have constantly written documents that people like about analytics. They've answered questions about analytics, and people have marked those as good answers. And what I'm getting to here is that if you don't have a tight integration in one single platform across the data points for, say, ideas, documents, question and answers, for badging, you really can't find an expert because you're going to have disparate data sources that aren't going to work together. And that's one of the, I guess, symptomatic challenges of, the Yammer approach, which is to have plugins for all these things, is that, the badges don't talk to the ideas and the questions don't talk to the badges, and et cetera, et cetera. So you really can't get a true expertise score. From a compliance perspective, one of the things that we had seen when clients come to us in the financial services space is that if someone has a social conversation and that conversation gets deleted by that person, one of the things that almost any organization is going to want to do is that they're going to want to be able to know why that person deleted that comment, right? If they wrote something really negative or inflammatory, or they were going to share something inappropriate, you're really going to want to know the backstory behind that in case it creates a kerfuffle, right? What happens in 2013 natively is that it literally deletes that physically from the database. There's no trace of that conversation. There's no audit trail. There's no history. And that's a pretty considerable issue for a lot of folks in financial services or more conservative companies. So what we do alternatively in social sites is that even if something gets deleted, it's just that it's not visible anymore. Users can't see it, but it's always going to be in the database and it's always going to be auditable. That's a pretty standard requirement for systems in the financial services space in more conservative areas. And you're going to want to be able to fine-tune control of how long storage is maintained of the social data. So whether it's going to be for a month, 90 days, 1 year, or even maybe archiving that to a record system. That kind of granularity in records management, fortunately, isn't there today in 2013 or Yammer. And then we see pretty common use cases around, block terms, being able to report any item, as being abusive, and those things are, those are growing into social platforms. We don't think those are really, differentiators, but they're not in some of the tools today. But what we do see as being quite important is that, again, as I mentioned, if something arises from the social stream, if it's something that does relate to a legal matter, it's going to bring a lot of comfort to a compliance officer or a risk officer in your organization to know that you've got features that you can kind of audit these conversations and quote unquote with what's called a legal hold, which is a very common thing that's done for most people's email inboxes for their documents. Is that they're going to want to be able to make sure that they are able to track all the conversations you're having. If it does relate to a legal matter. And so those are things that are built into social sites. We did build them into our product to meet compliance goals such as Sarbanes-Oxley and other regulatory guidelines for financial services and law firms, as Roland mentioned. Okay, something that's really cool that we see as being one of the key use cases for social is that social really usually starts out as a new medium for companies, so naturally the communications team kind of takes that on board. And we've seen the main use case for social in its initial world is to get some two-way dialogue, to be able to target communications and have those communications delivered in a very effective manner by led by a kind of a corporate comms initiative. Now, moving forward, we've actually taken those use cases and really answered what the more advanced clients want, besides kind of like stuffing that social experience onto the homepage. A communicator, what they're really trying to do when they do any kind of email news blast, or actually back in the day when you have an actual newsletter printed at a company that you pick up every morning on the way in when you punch your time card, they're trying to communicate strategic objectives and have folks aligned to those strategic objectives. And one of the big challenges of email and some of the other non-digital tools is that it's not a two-way conversation, but even more importantly, how do you track if someone's actually clicked the email? How do you track if they've read it? How do you know if people like it? And what are people's feedback, right? So instead of investing in some pretty expensive email marketing tools to track this information internally, what we've actually provided is our communication suite that allows an internal communicator to see all the views and impressions and see who's actually read their message. You can see who's liked it. You can see the replies, and then you can actually see what percentage of your audience that you intended to target was actually reached. And this gives you proof positive to say, right, out of the 107 potential folks that were supposed to see this inside the the global organization or perhaps a regional office or a department, I was able to get to 34% of the folks. They viewed it about 48 times. People viewed it, say, on average of 10 times, and that we got a few comments and likes. And and you can slice and dice that. You can see the analytics for that message that Stephanie wrote from a corporate comms perspective. And this is really powerful stuff. This is exactly what the mandate of corporate communications is, and that is to share strategic objectives and make sure that they are heard and understand their feedback from the organization. So we find communicators really, really excited about these capabilities. And this goes back to my prior point about, what is the real purpose of the social tool, right? It's great to have things like likes and comments and things like that, but what are you using them for, right? How do you deploy these tools for a real use case? And this is a great example of a built use case for corporate communications. And, that isn't something that we dreamed up on our own. This is something that, we worked in conjunction with companies like AMP, State Street, Turkcell, and those are really innovative companies that wanted to have this capability. Once the corporate communicators saw and believed in the vision for social, they really came up with these great use cases on their own. And so we've productized those to share with all of our customers. The next big thing that people tend to do once they have a social network in place is they want to be able to speed up innovation in their organization, right? They want to be able to either reduce costs, they want to be able to improve product cycles, they want to be able to figure out what the next big thing is, right? So if you're seeing all the popularity around those crowdsourcing websites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and those things like that, those are all examples of how you can crowdsource ideas instead of the old way of doing things in the industrial era, which was for Ford Motor Corporation to hire 20 PhDs and lock them in a room until they come back with the new latest and greatest product. No matter how many PhDs you may have in your organization, unless your CSIRO and folks like that, you may be able to get more economies of scale by going out to the crowds. So all your employees, and being able to get innovation from the fringes, as it's called. And so what Sitrion provides is a end-to-end platform for not only capturing the ideas and crowdsourcing the feedback, but being able to then transfer those ideas and choose which ones are the best to take into an innovation lab where they can be combined with the right experts and sponsors to deliver on a real project. And so it becomes from the fruition of the idea, from that spark, all the way down to delivering it as a project. So here you can see this built into SharePoint where folks can share ideas. This is how we can build a sustainable company. I can, Brian shared an idea about, okay, well, we don't have personal spending accounts. We should do that. Jen suggested we should redefine our travel policy. And so this allows me to vote on these ideas, and the best ideas will rise to the top. And the cool thing is we can get some commentary on that. So again, that's a very big use case, and one thing that's notably missing from the 2013 stack. Finally, when you look at mobility as an option, you might have things like around making sure that your mobile solution has integration to the MDM providers. And again, that's if you're in such a secure environment, you're probably very familiar with those tools. If you do have those security needs, it's pretty hard to try to get around those tools. If you do use them, you pretty much got to ensure your apps do work with those providers, like I mentioned, Good, AirWatch, and so on. And finally, one of the more challenging things as well is that if you're going to have a mobile app, how easy is it for your employees to connect, right? Do they have to type in their username and password? Do they have to type in a specific server name to discover what services they're allowed to use? All those kind of policy settings about who can use what app, et cetera, et cetera. Those are some nice things that Sitrion tries to simplify for you, so you don't have to be a extreme mobile expert. We can kind of streamline that process for you on different devices. So that really reduces overhead for the IT department. And other things like push notifications are quite important as well to make sure that people are getting your updates from the social network. So we've covered a lot of different things. I did promise to do a bit of demo, so I know I went through some of the discussion around how we focus on experts and get questions answered and ideas and such. I'm just going to give you a really brief kind of demo overview so you get a feel for what it looks like to use the Sitrion solution inside SharePoint 2013. Okay. So here we go on the home page. You can see the internal communication solution has actually been running, and so this is what it looks like on the home page. And so you can see some cool things, and I'm just going to really point out, I guess, what's very unique. But here in the social stream here on the left, you can see we've got a nice integrated view where if there are, say, new news articles here in our little feature rotator, they'll all actually automatically publish up from site publishing in SharePoint to news articles here in my newsfeed. you can see we've got some cool things in the feed that go on, such as these things called smart tips. And smart tips are basically personalized instructions that teach me how to use the social network that kind of pop up occasionally here and there, telling me how to make advantage of the tool. And so that's a really good way to get informed on how to best make use of the social network. You can also see that I've also configured social sites to do some snooping on my behalf and go on the internet and capture articles of interest to me. So you can see some things related to my interests. These could be things that I'm doing for market research. And if I want to share this with one of my colleagues, I can go ahead and target them and say, hey, Jeff, why don't you check out this article? And so social media sharing and monitoring is very easy, because what Sitrion does is it goes and aggregates news that's related to my world. And in addition, as we mentioned before, I can always make a quick status update here. I can do things like ask questions. I can add polls, and as well I can do private messaging for folks who are trying to get away from using email for quick one-off messages. So obviously very popular with the Facebook crowd. You'll also be able to see here something called My Influence. And what is influence, right? It kind of looks like a stock ticker, but what it is that influence, if you're familiar with the consumer social network clout, it shows your relative percentage ranking from a score from 0 to 100 of your influence inside my corporation's social network. So if you are the aficionado of social, you probably have a higher score than myself. And what this does is kind of benchmark you against your other staff to see how collaborative you are. And so we often see this index in knowledge worker companies if it's relevant, not to intimidate anyone, but if they are really pride themselves on sharing knowledge, like a research firm or an R&D firm. You might want to see that this score is, that you're kind of, in line with the collaboration strategy of the company to be social and open. And of course, we do things like recommend colleagues to you and different content. Now, let's kind of surf around the intranet and go into one of the communities. Here in the help and feedback community, you can see that we have, the social stream here, and this community shows me all the updates that's happening inside the social feed here. I can do things like filter down to just the questions of the poll to do a full text search inside the feed to find what I'm looking for. And here we can see that when Toby has updated this Word document, we've got a nice conversation going on here. Now you can see there's some new content types like ideas that are being shared. So here, as I mentioned before, I had submitted earlier that it would be really cool if we could bring our iPads to work. And I can see that a few other people have sounded in. Robert said, hey, what about Android tablets? He's got a really good point there. Maybe we should chat through that idea, because maybe iPads aren't the only thing that we should look at the office. So you can get that feedback, and you can get information there. And here's a good example of a question and answer as well. So here, Bart was asking, who can help me configure mobile access to SharePoint? And we can see that there's a few discussions here, but Brian's answer was marked the best one. And so Brian will get points for that answer and potentially win a badge later on. And so again, this SharePoint site, the great thing about it is that we convert the sites into social communities, so you don't have to have that kind of confusion in 2013 between a community site and a discussion and rolling up and making sure you follow all the people. It kind of just works. We've got one big easy follow button in the front, and you don't have to worry about multiple sites and all that kind of confusion there. And as I mentioned before, our ability to find experts is probably one of the most important and often used features. So if I want to find an expert and say, SharePoint 2013, if I click on that term, it's going to look through all the social activity, the profiles of all these folks, and I'm going to be able to find the expert based on their credibility in my social network. Again, this isn't what people say about themselves or in their SharePoint profile. This is purely based on other employees like what Andrew's writing, or if they, they condone his ideas, or if he answers questions about SharePoint 2013. So this is true expertise. This isn't, someone just updating their SharePoint profile and hacking the system. And so I can ask Andrew a question, and I can say, when is SharePoint Server 2016 going to be released? Because I think he's at the SharePoint conference. And the cool thing is that when this, when this update gets sent to Andrew, it's going to appear on his wall. He's going to see that update as well. And not only will Andrew get this update, and not only can he see that question, but because it's tagged with SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint Conference, this message is actually going to go out and be notifying everybody in my social network who's an expert in SharePoint 2013, which is quite cool. So, if Andrew is at the SharePoint conference and he's having a bit too much fun, other folks can actually get back to my question, because it's going to go to all those friendly faces that we saw who are an expert in SharePoint 2013. So, things like link will pop up if I'm an expert in SharePoint 2013, and I can even use link to respond back to that message inside the social network, and we'll see the answer pop up here. Right, so if somebody fictitiously, if I'm just making an example here, if they use link, they'd be able to respond that way. And that points to a really important topic, which is around the concept of trying to extend the reach of the social network to all the different interactivity points or integration points that an employee might use. So another example besides link is actually Outlook. So here you can see here we actually have the social sites stream plugin inside Outlook. So I'm inside Outlook 2013. This works in 2010. And what you can see here is that I've actually got my social stream. And quite funnily enough, just very recently with the SharePoint conference, my friends tell me that when they were there in Las Vegas, it got pretty interesting. They turned the lights off and had these gas lamps on at night. So it was quite interesting night, I'm sure, for all the techies running around in the dark in a in a trade show conference with lights turned on. But that's the Sitrion booth over at SharePoint Conference. So here I am, sitting in Australia, and I'm able to see all the cool things that are going on in Las Vegas, directly from within my Outlook browser. And I can see all the questions, I can see all the comments, the ideas. The full social stream is right here. I don't have to go through and open my browser. I can really just be able to see everything that is going on in my social network. And this is great for folks who aren't, going to be, early adopters, right? They may not really be the kind of folks that, whip out their mobile phone and start, going away on social networking. A lot of executives love to use Outlook, so this is a great way just to slowly introduce them to the tools. And of course, I can do things like, like liking and answering and, adding my comments and all that fun stuff, right? You can do all the features that you normally would. You can create posts. You can see your notifications. I can type an answer. All that good stuff. You can do it directly from within Outlook. And that's, again, all just about, reaching out to where employees are instead of making them try to, convince them to use your cool social network. And so, to kind of finally wrap up, to talk about some of the, innovation capabilities, here's what that innovation community looks like. And again, this is where I can submit ideas. I can, vote on these ideas and such and see them rise to the top. And so, again, by me voting on this idea, I'm giving Andrew points, right, because I'm liking his ideas and I think they're valuable to the business. That all then goes back in and ties back to this concept of badging and seeing all the different badges that, that Andrew has actually won for his collaborative nature. And so we're showing a really tightly integrated environment, from a single tool that really leverages the best practices of social networking that we've seen in both the consumer and the enterprise world. And you can see that, this does require some tight integration across all these different use cases. So with that, I would like to, thank you for this session. I want to kind of wrap up very quickly to talk about some of the future strategy of where we think social is going. And so to really understand that, I think some of the key things you want to ask yourselves is that, are you going to run a mixture of 2010 and 2013? When are you going to go to 2013, right? And also taking into consideration some of the points that, there is no additional features that are going to be provided for SharePoint Server 2016 on-premise, as we heard from Jared Spataro on his blog on Office 365. And, if you're going to use cloud, nothing wrong with that. Cloud is great. We support it. We have some clients in the cloud of ours as well. But, what use cases do you want to support and how soon are you going to get there? And are there other parts of your ecosystem, such as SAP or other ERP systems or task management systems, that you need to perhaps integrate into your social stream so you can be able to approve those tasks, get them done within the social stream? That's an important thing to also keep in mind. And again, what are your business goals, right? One of the things that we're actually doing is we're actually working very tightly with the HR folks to make sure that you can see all the activity from your team, do things like social onboarding. So we are seeing that social will go further into business processes and more departmental use cases, in addition to just say the the innovation department, the internal communications department. We're seeing HR as actually the more mature resting place for a social network. So that's kind of the vision we're sharing there. And again, you're going to want to look at where you can actually provide some of this technology on different devices, so you can focus on these 4 key areas. And we'll be sharing more and more details around some of the features and capabilities we have there. And I encourage you to also look at some of the smart routines we have if you are actually using SAP and you want to get a better user interface through SharePoint. All right. So with that, I just want to open up the chat box for questions. I'll pass control back to Roland, and Roland can actually kind of manage this this chat situation as well. We've got a few attendees today, so what I'd like you to do is, if you do have any questions, please just go ahead into the chat screen and enter those questions in, and we'll try to answer them live in the few minutes that we have remaining.
So for those looking for the option, it's just on the bottom right-hand side of your GoToMeeting, and there is a box there, and put into the chat window, or also the question will take from either.
Okay, I think we got one question through. So the question is, let me just paraphrase it real quick. Right. So the question that I'm saying is about so using Yammer around capabilities around badging, ideation, those other things. And so the question is, doesn't Yammer have those capabilities? So if you're familiar with Yammer, it has a sort of development marketplace. So this marketplace is a place where third-party developers can build integrations into the Yammer platform. So being at the cloud solution is a pretty common approach. And so what happens is that if you want to get capabilities, you would have to buy a third-party product, or for ideas you'd use like a Bright Idea or a Spigot. And so, as you mentioned before, yes, those are totally options. You'll be able to see an idea inside your Yammer stream. But again, one of the things that I kind of alluded to was that what we've learned from our experience is that you're going to want to make sure that, say, like your ideas application, you're allowed to see what people are voting on, so that you can actually then award someone a badge for contributing. That's going to drive greater utilization and greater uptake of the social tools. Unfortunately, that's not something that happens today, because really, when you're using Yammer as a core platform, Badgeville doesn't know about, say, Bright Idea, for example, or the other tools. And also because it's kind of a more open network, almost like like the Salesforce application market. There's really a lot of different choices. You could have 3 or 4 different ideas tools. There's even 2 or 3 different options for how you manage question and answer. So you've kind of got a broad set of tools to pick from, and they don't necessarily integrate with each other. And even from a compliance perspective, if you're okay with, say, like using Yammer because you trust, say, Microsoft's data centers in the United States, once you open up the option to use plugins, you really have no control over where that data lives. Just because you're using a plugin that's inside Yammer, you've got to realize that that plugin is actually coming from a different vendor, and they could be in a different country with different SLAs and different data policies and different terms and conditions. So you really got to be able to talk through these scenarios and understand where that data is living and the different compliance rules it's having. So instead of having a single cloud solution like Yammer, you might end up having 6 or 7 clouds to really get all the different features you want there. So that's a good question.
Okay, Sinead, can you see there's a few other questions coming through? Do you want to keep fielding them on, or happy to pass them between the two of us? So I'll just speak more to one of the questions here from one of our attendees, Alistair, asking whether SharePoint 2013 has better mobile capabilities within it, and having some bad experiences with SharePoint 2010. So SharePoint 2013 as a platform, they've included what's called device channels within SharePoint. So what that allows you to do is SharePoint's now smart enough to know which device it's being sent to, whether that's an iPad or whether it's an iPhone or whether it's a Windows device. And what it'll do is it'll do its best to refactor itself to give the best experience on that mobile device. By no means is that fully optimized mobile. There's still some smarts to do around the design of turning a full intranet into perhaps 3 key buttons on a mobile device like an app view. But SharePoint 2013 has made some advances in its mobile story. I'm happy to talk to you more about that offline. Junaid, do you want to talk to some of the other questions here? So Junaid, having seen the questions. Okay, so Junaid, there is a question here asking, can you comment on a news article with NewsGator?
Yes, so you can. So if it's published from, say, like SharePoint blog or blog site, traditional site publishing, you can. So we've actually developed an integration both for SharePoint 2010 and 2013 to allow the integration of, say, likes and comments from that traditional SharePoint content publishing to flow up into our social stream and vice versa.
No problem at all. Another question here asking, when a company outgrows out-of-the-box social features, can we implement the Sitrion solution at a later date and retain existing social data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, what's nice about the Sitrion solution is that it leverages the events that are generated from either SharePoint 2010 or 2013. So there is an event model that Sitrion kind of introspects and integrates into its, I would say, subsumes into its feed. So when we install Sitrion, it'll just simply have the existing data that's sitting there already because it's integrating it into its greater feed.
Nice. Okay, there's a few more. Have there been issues with employees not interacting on internal social media mediums because of fears that it could impact their employment?
Yeah, we often heard that in the cycle of any new technology, right? When telephones were first invented, people said, oh my God, if we give telephones at people's desks, they're just going to goof off and they're going to call their husbands and wives and not do work, right? So one of the great quotes that I had from a community manager from AMD, he was actually responsible for doing the evangelization and sharing and contribution aspects as well as the monitoring, right? In his tenure, over 3 years, he never had to delete one post. So I think that although we have features for blacklisting bad words and preventing people from using them and reporting abuse, we just never see that stuff. If someone's a loose cannon and they want to be fired, they could do something like that. But the social network essentially is like one very big hallway in your office. And so I think people get that concept that if they don't want to be fired, they're not going to do something silly in the hallway, take the clothes off and run down the aisle.
Maybe not in your office. Another question here. Do you have support programs or a pathway for helping clients implement onto existing SharePoint platforms, or do you solely rely on your partners?
So we have a methodology that is rooted in change management principles called the Sitrion Adoption Framework. It is something that is it's one part technical and kind of 3 parts non-technical, right? So it looks at business process change, training, change management, and cultural alignment. And so the technology parts here are really just the first step of your journey, right? Just the beginning. So we teach our partners both in technology and on the adoption framework so that they holistic solution. So Antares is definitely trained across both. They've used the adoption framework on their existing clients over we have a few. So it's one of the, I guess, sincere benefits of the Sitrion platform is that we have a very strong, change management practice that is specific to social. that really goes beyond just the basics of just getting things installed. You know, at the end of the day, Sitrion is just a plugin to SharePoint, right? It's a managed service application. You don't install extra hardware, you don't install extra software. You know, it just plugs into your existing SharePoint infrastructure. So it's really easy to get going. We realize that that's just the first step, though. You know, you've got to train people how to use it. You've got to create real business use cases for people to want to use it and see the value in it. You know, there's a famous article from Gartner called, and it says, entitled "Social Tools that, you know, provide and pray is not a social strategy," and we definitely agree with that.
Good stuff. And you've answered in one fell swoop there one of the other questions, which was asking, does Sitrion rely on any additional servers? Which I think you've already addressed there.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't.
So another question asking, can you rate documents?
Yes. So there's even a feature where whereby we can actually have more than just rating. You can actually have a social conversation around the document. And what I'll do is I'll try to find a screenshot on my desktop so I can show you that feature. But it's actually quite cool. Yeah, there it is. So I'll screen sharing. I should be showing that screen. You should see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing a PowerPoint document, and in that PowerPoint document, I have the NewsGator plugin that's called Sitrion, which is updated, and that's essentially showing you a social screen that's actually in the Office document. And so I can have a full conversation, I can like, comment, talk to people. It's all live, it's all interactive. And that's much better than just using like the traditional comment feature. You know, inline comments and reviewing for tracking changes is very important. What if you don't want to stuff, you know, a whole conversation into a document? I mean, you know, that's a real tool, right? So you can even get really collaborative inside the Office.
Nice. Okay. So, any more questions?
All right.
Let me just put these on. A few more might be coming through. So the next question is, I've just looked at my viewer paying to asking around e-discovery with using Sitrion tools. And is it the same for images in an image library?
Sorry, I was speaking over you at the moment. So the question was around e-discovery of the image library, is that right?
The e-discovery for Sitrion and SharePoint, and then on top of that, what you just showed, you know, is it possible to do the rating within an image library for an image?
Right, yeah. So, you know, as far as e-discovery goes, yeah, I built in a feature for way back in the day for JP Chase, which allows you to do a legal hold and e-discovery search, right? So essentially what you can do is you can hold employees all their social conversations, their updates on social networks, and then be able to extract that for delivery to a lawyer in discovery format. So it provides a table Excel spreadsheet. And you can hold that across one or multiple employees, and then you can extract that for the purposes of handing off to a lawyer. So yes, definitely e-discovery is built in. That's kind of one of the key requirements for the financial services folks. And as far as like, you know, doing ratings on image galleries and stuff like that, you know, we don't expect to have an image gallery, you know, solution for SharePoint Conference, but we have taken some strides, right? What we do is we do allow now multi-file upload. And the next thing we're working on, the next version, is to create kind of like a photo album concept. So that is something that we are looking at. And yes, you know, you can, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, even in SharePoint 2010, you can natively, you know, rate any content item with, you know, 1 to 5 stars. But you don't need to use social sites for that from Sitrion.
Correct. Good stuff. All right, we'll give it another few minutes to see if any more questions to come through. But in the meantime, if as people are thinking, I'll start to wrap up. Thanks again, everyone who's joined us for this morning's webinar. Recording of this will be made available, and we'll send it out to you via email. There'll be a link back to our website for you to download a copy for yourself. Feel free to direct this to your colleagues who couldn't make it, or any interested colleagues you have out this session. And we'll be doing a follow-up in the coming weeks just to answer any more questions you may have thought of after the event. But thanks to Junaid for jumping on and presenting. And again, I was Roland from Antares, and hopefully chat to you guys in the coming weeks. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you for your time, everyone.